Welcome to the 10 and 2 podcast. I'm Kat.
And I'm Catlin.
And we're here every week talking watches, photography, adventure, and exploring the world of horology.
How are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
Good morning.
We don't often record in the mornings.
No.
But we have a special guest on today.
We do. It was a rush to get over here, but we do have a special guest, and I'm very, very excited about today's interview.
Yeah, so we have Mr. Edouard Meylan of Moser and Company on today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being on our show. We've talked about Mosur from the beginning of our show, so we've been on for about a year now. And good or bad sometimes, we'll be honest. But Mosur has definitely been brought up a time or two.
I think my first hands-on experience with Mosur was shortly after we started the podcast, because I was in Vegas around this time last year and had gotten to go to Watches in Switzerland and see them in person for the first time, and was absolutely quite impressed and smitten from that point on. So. Yeah. Very excited.
You were a fangirl after that.
I was, for sure. Very much so.
Yeah, for me, I think last year when we were able to go out to Burlingame, California, we visited Topper Jewelers, and they carried Mosur, and I was able to see them firsthand. And they're incredibly beautiful dials, and we're excited. We actually have one of your pieces in for review that we will be reviewing later in the week, and that is the new Streamliner Center Seconds, which... We'll get into that in a little bit.
I have to eat some crow, I feel like, for what I said about the first one.
But no, it's just a beautiful, beautiful piece. But so Ed, let's get into a little bit of just like facts about yourself. When did you come on to Mosur?
Well, it's back in 2012. Mosur is a 192 years old brand, but went through different hands for many years, and there were like about 20 years without kind of real production. That was the 80s, 90s. And then the great-grandson of Heinrich Moser, together with some other entrepreneurs, they relaunched it in 2002 to 2005. But they run into financial issues. Great brand, but yeah, tough. And that's when we decided, together with my brother and my father, to buy Moser. And that's 2012. And I started working as a CEO on I think it was the Basel World 2013, so around May 2013. It's been a bit more than 7 years already.
Wow.
Very cool. Were you, what was your experience in watches before Mosur? Were you an enthusiast before, or?
Yeah, kind of. I was born in the watch industry. I grew up in Le Brassus. I don't know if you know Le Brassus, but a few hundred meters from Audemars Piguet headquarters. Still in the Vallée de Joux, there's Breguet, Blancpain, JLC, AP, so some of the top manufacturers are there, and my entire family worked in those manufacturers. All my friends, my father was running AP for a few years. My ancestors were watchmakers, so yeah, I was born into watchmaking, and then I did different things, but when you have it in your blood, you end up going back to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think one thing I've noticed differently about you versus other CEOs of other brands, especially when listening back to some interviews and stuff, there's a clear difference. When I hear you speak, there's a passion there that I don't always hear. So a lot of times when we listen to some of the CEOs, it's a business talk. You know, they talk about sales, and when I hear you speak, it's about the passion in the watchmaking, and there's a clear difference there, and I definitely respect that.
I think it depends a lot on how you get to that. I think a lot of us independent brands share that passion, and that's probably why we go along so well together. When you look at bigger brands, it's very, very financial driven. It has to be. I mean, these are huge companies, employing thousands of people and hundreds of millions of revenue, or even billions of revenue. It's a different approach. It's sad sometimes that you don't have the passion for the product, even if you're at the helm of such a big brand. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you end up there and you're still enjoying it, that's fine for them. But for me, I mean, I love the product. I love the tradition. I I try to bring something to this industry, and it's fun. I mean, I'm super happy I'm proud and lucky to be in that position and proud to be in that position. And it's a pleasure to go to work every day and have the team around and go through those challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key differences when you look at the watch community, the watch market in general. You have the non-enthusiast community that's really driven by the bigger brands, but it seems like the real diehard enthusiast community is really leaning more towards independence recently. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the fact that you guys independents are watch enthusiasts. Before it's a business, like you were in the community, you were part of the industry before you took over a watch company. And I think that kind of respect is so much appreciated by enthusiasts. You get so much attention to detail and so many new things. There's a new energy, there's new excitement that you don't get with a lot of the older, more established brands that are in it basically for a bottom dollar. And that really shows, I feel like, because I've seen more enthusiasm over independent brands like yourself, like MB&F, and so many other brands in the more recent years than I've seen for a lot of these bigger brands.
I think the human factor is extremely important, and some big brands manage to keep that. If you look at the Stern family for Patek Philippe or Richard Mille for Richard Mille, obviously, they have a human dimension, a human factor, a person behind it, and I think that makes a huge difference. People want to connect to not only to something but also to someone, and a lot of the independents are so committed to their brands that they'll be the one answering the phone, answering the emails, and engaging the people. And I think this community of watch lovers, aficionados, collectors, whatever you call them, and they're very different type of people. They like that. They like that. And I think it gives trust and comfort that you're investing in something and there's somebody responsible and taking responsibility behind it. And the problem with bigger brands, it's become so big that, if you have any issue, you will call a service center that will try to put the issue on you before they actually go through it, because they would have to escalate. But in many cases, it can happen. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, we have many cases where people call us like, "Oh, the watch is not working," and obviously it fell. You see like a big bump on the case or something. But you cannot always say it this way to the person, and you respect that they still invested a lot of money in that product. So you find a solution that is good for you and good for them. And problem with those big organizations is you have so many steps, and the management is so complicated. And we see it through this crisis. I mean. Taking decisions for big corporations in our industry is so complicated. It gives us huge opportunities as independent because we're agile, reactive, proactive, ready to take risks, and it helps us go through those difficult times much easier than anybody else.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And then as far as being independent and more in control of every aspect of your business, you're also in control of so much more of the manufacturing, I feel like, than a lot of independents are, because Mosur is actually broken down into two businesses, correct? So you have Mosur, which is over, the actual watches. And then, I cannot remember the name of your other company that does
Precision Engineering.
Yes. And so you manufacture almost all of your own movement parts, correct?
Yeah, including hairsprings. I think that's a big part of our business, not in terms of revenue, but from a strategic standpoint. We produce hairsprings, we develop hairsprings. That's how the collaboration with MB&F came. Of course, we developed a relationship and a friendship with Max, but before that, we were supplying hairsprings and developing hairsprings for his movement, but also for about 25 other brands. We're going to be producing about 86,000 hairsprings this year, and we produce and we used 2,000 for Moser. So you can imagine the 84,000 are going to other brands. Many small independents, a lot of all our friends, the MB&Fs, many others that I cannot name, but also big brands, and that's good. That gives us a little bit more power than our size would give us. And that's comforting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting.
Definitely. Well, so with everything going on in the current crisis, did you run into a lot of production slowdown and things like that then, if you're producing all of your own components?
Well, we don't produce all components, especially on the like the bracelets, the dials, the cases are all external. We don't have the size for that. So we really focus on the movement. So we face some issues with suppliers slowing down because they're too dependent on big brands, and we're not big enough to keep them running. So many closed down for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and that put us a little bit under pressure in deliveries. But so far, we had an amazing year. I think, as I said before, being agile and reactive really helped us in those difficult times. We many things. We reviewed our pipeline, focused on high-end product. We had an amazing lineup of launches this year that helped us a lot. At some point, 95% of our doors were closed globally. It's the time we chose to implement our e-commerce platform, and today we are on par with last year with much higher margin because we're selling a significant amount directly. It's in those difficult times that you see really who your partners are. I mean, there are some people we haven't heard. We tried to contact them, and since March we haven't heard of them. And they have the others that even if the door is closed, they're still fighting. They're still trying to sell. And selling a Moser for an independent retailer makes a huge difference. I mean, if you sell an MB&F collaboration, it's an $80,000 watch. I mean, that helps your month, So I think that we benefited a lot from our positioning, small quantities, things that are limited, well-crafted, where we really protect the value. And a lot of people felt, well, I love this watch. If I don't buy it now, it might be gone in a few weeks. So we know that people don't need watches. And there are much higher priorities today with what is happening around the world. But I think some people still want, this emotion of buying something beautiful and for themselves. And if it's available and will be available in months because it's so widely produced, then what's the point? I think that's where brands like ours really benefited from this period.
Yeah. I don't think from our end, watch buying has slowed down. I know both of us have gone a little crazy recently.
So it's thanks to you that it worked.
Yeah.
Have to stop. But everybody else can still go buy all the watches.
Yeah.
we have to slow down.
We do.
Well, the US has been doing amazingly well. I mean, to be honest, we saw a huge momentum this year for Moser. Incredible. The fan base has grown tremendously, I think. A lot of love. We feel a lot of love coming from the US right now.
I'm curious, where does the US sit as far as your customer base? Is it pretty high on the list?
Well, it used to be quite small 4 or 5 years ago. It was really almost not significant. It was like a couple of percent. And now, this year, it's probably going to be close to 20% of our business.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, great job from, Fernanda. Mike is our partner here, and just I think slowly, getting the name out there, people starting to wear it and show it to others. I think that's the strength of the community, is having people being very proud of what they're wearing and knowing the story behind. And I don't have to sell my watches in a way; it's somebody else doing it for me, and that's much more authentic.
Absolutely, and I think that's the interesting thing for me about the brand is that when you go on your website or when you see some of these pieces, there's a story there that I personally want to find out more about. Right. It's not a watch that you can look at and then you can move on to the next piece and the next piece. It's, oh my gosh, I want to know more about it because they're so interesting. From the dial to the hands to the movement, it's not a cookie cutter watch.
Yeah, for me, each watch tells a story in a way. I mean, and that's why we have a lot of iterations of things very different from one another, but always, being the Swiss Mad, the Swiss Alp, there was something behind a message that we want to express. And sometimes through the color of the dial, in many cases, we change the color from a shade of green to another because we feel we cannot just use the exact same one because the watch is different. I mean, we see it really as a piece of art, and you cannot plug and play elements from one to the other. Sometimes you just need to rethink and look at it as a whole, and it's not finished until all details fit. And sometimes it's a few weeks before the launch, we're like, oh my God. And it happened like the watch you were referring to, the Streamliner that we just recently launched. A few weeks ago, the dial, we were not satisfied with the dial. It just didn't work. And we had been working years on those dials. And suddenly you're like, you put everything together and you're like, no, that doesn't work. This dial works very well with that watch, but it doesn't work with this one. Mm-hmm. And then you start again. And then thanks God, we have an organization that is, as I said before, very reactive. Our suppliers learn to work with us where, we can go back last minute and say, sorry, we need to change everything. And they get used to that. But sorry,
not sorry. Yeah.
But, in the watch industry, people love to say it's impossible, and in the end, everything is possible. They're so passionate about their job, and they like actually the challenge. So we like to go back and say, sorry, we need to start again.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Was it a different color on the Streamliner?
It was it was a different color slightly, but the biggest difference was we had a vertical brushed effect that we had on the first chrono, which worked very well, in my opinion, with the gray, but with this green that we had, there were some mirror effects. So the green was in 90% of the angles beautiful, and there were about 10% where it just became a bit kitschy, and for me, that's a no-go. I mean, either we've satisfied 100% or we don't launch the watch. So thanks God, Watches and Wonders was cancelled, because otherwise we probably would have had to launch it in that configuration, which sucks.
Everything happens for a reason, though.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
it's fate.
It all worked out, for sure.
I mean, it's stunning. You guys really knocked it out of the park with that one. And I mean, I totally get it. I can only imagine that if you had gone with the other dial, sure enough, people were going to take wrist shots at just that right angle that you're like, oh, it's not the good angle. No, this is
people always
stunning.
have something to say about a watch, right? So you need to have the haters, and that's good.
Yeah.
We even had sometimes people criticizing the chrono, but that's good. It's fine.
I don't know who would do that.
Who is he talking about?
I have no idea. God.
But let's get into a little bit of the designs of the watch. You guys are known for being daring, for lack of a better term. Where does that inspiration and drive come from?
Necessity, as we were saying, we're small brands and we're fighting against huge corporations. If you're MB&F and I love MB&F, a lot of respect for Max and what he's doing. I'm not saying his job is easy. I think it's very difficult to create crazy things every time. But your job is to create crazy things. Our job is to create things that are, traditional, elegant, but they have to be different. We need to be different from those big institutions that are those big brands we were referring to, the Patek, the APs, the Breguets, the Rolex, etc. So by necessity, we need to be daring. We need to try things. We need to fail and try again and do something that stands out. When I bought Moser back in 2012, I looked at the products and I was like, these are beautiful watches. Beautiful white gold, silver dial. And I talked to many, I was already in the industry, so I talked to a lot of journalists and retailers, and they all said, yeah, I really like what Moser is doing. And I was like, why? They had some quality issues, they had a lot of issues, but I was like, why don't they sell more products if everybody likes it? And what I came to realize, and I think over the years, is that liking a product is not sufficient. You really need people to love that product, to really feel the emotion, get the goosebumps, to spend $20,000 or even $12,000 for our entry point, and way more for the crazy products. This is a huge investment, and there's tons of options. So we need something that really polarizes. And we decided from that point onwards that we needed to find things that when you put a Moser on a tray next to Calatrava, Patrimony, Jules Audemars, which are also round silver dial watches, well, ours cannot be compared because 99.999% of the people would choose one of the big brands.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson. And then we decided to do the Arctic Blue, the no logo, no indexes, because nobody else was doing it, because that's what represented us. That's, yes, daring. The first time we did a watch without logo indexes, everybody told me it's impossible to sell. And I asked my team why. They said, but because everybody buys a watch with a logo. I said, well, they don't buy our logo because nobody knows it. And half of the people are criticizing because it's the old script, old-fashioned logo. But that's how we differentiate ourselves. And I think these were kind of milestones where we really started, and I think as a team, to understand what we had to do to be successful. So when it comes to that particular piece, the standards are so high that, and we know there's tons of brands are working on it or have released watches, and everybody's comparing with Genta, which I had the chance to work with many years back, which was a genius. But you cannot compare. You need to be you need to be somewhere else. You need to break the rules. And not just say it. You need to actually do it, and take those risks. I said, if we release the Streamliner, then we need to do all in. Either it fails badly, but at least we have tried to do something completely different that people look at and be like, oh yeah, it's not things that we used to, and maybe we need time to understand and appreciate.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like a good music. I mean, the music that you listen when you're 15 and you still listen today, for me, 30 years later, is the music that at first I hated, or I didn't really understand. And a good example for me is Pink Floyd. The first time I listened to Pink Floyd, they were so conceptual that I was like, and I remember my cousin who was a little bit older made me listen to it. And I was like, no, this is not for me. I was much more into things that were, pop music, more easy to listen to. And I can't even remember what I was listening to at that time, because maybe 3 months later, I was not listening to something completely different. Well, I'm still listening to Pink Floyd. I'm probably going to be listening to Pink Floyd until my last day. So I think if you want to create something that has the potential, and I'm just saying potential, to become something iconic, then you need to make sure it's so different that a lot of people will not understand it right away, and it will take time and iterations. And again, it's not a picture. It's also, as you said, you have the watch now. It's probably very different from what you've seen in the pictures. Also because of the complexity of what we created here. And to go back to your original question, I went quite far there. I think it's necessary. Otherwise, everything we tried to do things where we said, okay, now more people know us, so let's do something a little bit more democratic that we could use to touch and sell to a wider audience. Never sold. Why? Because you couldn't compare it to something else.
That's interesting, because I would never really associate Moser with being democratic based off of, I mean, you have a history of like your YouTube channel and these absolutely fun and hilarious YouTube videos that you've done, taking very subtle jabs at the industry. But I feel like it just comes from a point where, as an independent, these are things that you're passionate about. These aren't just watches that are made to be worn just because of the name on the brand or anything like that. It's a real passion behind what watches actually represent to you. And I think that it's not democratic compared to what the rest of the industry is doing and how the rest of the industry feels. It really kind of ruffles some feathers realistically. And I think that it takes understanding how different Moser is as a brand to understand where these videos come from, and even where the Swiss Alps watch come from, and the Mad watch, and the Icons watch. It's not necessarily even just taking jabs. It's bringing awareness to problems that are in the Swiss stereotype part of the industry, which is not a very democratic thing to do.
But that's probably why we failed every time we tried to be democratic. But you're not representative for, I mean, imagine Moser being, I mean, we are in stores, for example, in Lucerne, Switzerland, where there's, I would say 99% of the people going into the stores there are tourists. And they might only know Rolex even when they enter the store. And we try to I mean, we've been selling to those people, but marginally. And at some point you say, well, we want a bigger part of the cake. So let's try to do things that are, the round silver dial, Moser logo on it, maybe a little bit fumé. Well, that doesn't work. Because again, they don't know, they've never seen those videos. Somebody behind the desk trying to sell it, but they have 30 other brands they can sell. So they're just going to put it next to something else. And again, then the comparison starts. And as an independent, unknown brand, you have very little chance. So that's why we need products that people will say, wow, amazing, I love it. Or, oh no, that's not for me, I hate it.
No, I understand that, because I think for me personally, I became familiar with your brand through the Swiss Alps watch initially a few years ago. And I'll be honest, I was a hater. I thought, this watch looks like an Apple Watch. Why would anyone want to buy this? But like you said, through learning the story, through learning the watch, and seeing other pieces through time, my opinion has completely changed. And now I have so much respect for that watch that it's probably my favorite in your entire lineup. One that I was a complete hater on. So I absolutely get that. And
a lot of people hated it. I think a lot of people hated it also because it was the first one that we did like this. Yeah. And a lot of people said, you're stealing designs and stuff like that. Well, for me, in a way, we were paying respect, to be honest, to beautiful modern designs and showing, as you mentioned before. I mean, it's really, for us, it was a way to express our opinion. And writing a press release to express your opinion doesn't work. Nobody's going to listen to us. But I think having a very symbolic product to express it worked way better in our industry. And the Swiss Alps watch was definitely a piece that put us on the map for a lot of people. And we're coming to the end of that collection now. I mean, we're going to have a final edition in a few weeks or months. And I think it's going to be it's kind of nice to close the chapter and there's tons of things we will do in the future, and we have done since that, saying, it was this small phase in the history of Moser, and now it's coming to the end. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Well, and it comes down to independent brands being proactive as far as finding finding solutions to problems. Because I was listening to an interview where you said that you basically had these rectangular movements sitting around that you couldn't do anything with. So the fact that you took these movements that had been sitting around, and instead of marking them off the books, you created something that put your brand on the map realistically for a lot of people who weren't so super familiar with it. I think that's really amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds very opportunistic, but yeah, that's the other side of the story.
No, it's incredibly cool. And then, so how do you get to, like, what was your motivation or your vision when it came to working with, you work with some really unique materials like Vantablack, and your watch was the first watch that I had ever seen in person with Vantablack, and it is ridiculously amazing. I know you're not the only brand that uses it, but I had never seen anything like that before. So where does the inspiration come from to work with some of these most, ridiculous materials that most people would steer away from?
Well, I think I see Moser as being a brand that builds the bridge between traditional brands and modern watchmaking. And in everything we do, we try to respect and use the codes of traditional watchmaking and craftsmanship. And you can look at the movement, at the finishing of the cases, etc. But at the same time, we try to have a touch of modernity, a touch of modern design, and could be through the dies, through the materials. And I think in the case of that particular watch, the first Vantablack, I discovered this material through one of our friends in the other independent brand. As you said, there's somebody else used it before us. It was MCT. They did a few components on the dial with that material, and I discovered it. Unfortunately, the brand disappeared, and they presented it to me, and they said, "Oh, you should use it." And I was like, at that time, no, I don't want to use it if somebody else has used it before. But then I looked at it and realized that this is an amazing material, because it was developed for the NASA, for the aerospace, to do the coating inside the telescopes to absorb all lights and avoid any reflection when you want to take a beautiful picture, a very precise picture in the universe. And it's a very difficult material to use. You cannot apply indexes. You cannot put the logo on it. So that's perfect for us, because we have dials that are so empty that we don't put anything on it. I was like, if I do it, nobody can copy us. Nobody can do it the same, since it's kind of becoming our trademark. And at the same time, it's really, and in the first one we launched, we had a hand-wound movement with a perpetual moon, which is very kind of a romantic, not very useful complication, and has something to do with space. And then suddenly putting this black hole on the dial was for us a very cool way to transform something very kind of old-fashioned, traditional, into something very modern and cool. And as you were saying before, every watch tells a story, but I think for me, that was a little bit of that story we wanted to tell. You're wearing a black hole with this perpetual moon with a huge precision. I think there's 1 day deviation in 1,027 years. And that was a limited edition. And when we launched it, the reaction of the people was incredible. And I mean, people were getting crazy about that watch. We had this movement for 5 or 6 or 7 years, and we sold more watches in a week than we had sold the years before, just because of that material in this color. And a year later, we did the Aventurine, which was more like the Milky Way and the moon floating on it. Yeah. And we started building a story. There's other materials, maybe 1 day meteorite or something like this, that kind of creates this story around this particular movement.
That's amazing. And I want to touch on something too that you mentioned, which was, you have that traditional watchmaking, but then you bring that modern touch to it. And I see that a lot with some of your pieces, because you've started to offer some pieces that are, I wouldn't completely say ladies' pieces, but they're maybe geared more towards women. And I love that they're not, 16 millimeter tiny watches either. They're real sizes that we feel a lot of women actually want. Yeah. Are you going to expand that a little bit more in your collection?
We like to say that all our watches are unisex. There's no ladies or men's watches. I mean, there's a significant number of ladies wearing 42, 43 millimeters, which is part of our collection. The size is determined by the size of our movements. We have large movements. Most of them are 2.5 hertz or 3 hertz with large power reserve. I mean, the minimum we have is 3 to 5 days, and the max is 7 to 10. And that determines, I mean, they're usually about 30 millimeter or more diameters. So, for example, 38 is the smallest we can go. We could go smaller, but then it would look too thick. And I think for me, there's like almost like a golden number. You need to be careful that you cannot go too fat. Otherwise, it just doesn't look good. And we had a lot of requests. People say, oh, you need to make a 36. There's always somebody who wants either bigger or smaller. Eventually, you cannot do everything. And we like to be, in the center of the Gauss curve. I think between 38 and 42 is our sweet spot. We do sometimes, because of the size of the movements, things that go up to 43, like the minute repeater, and a few other things like the Pioneer, where we needed for the power reserve a little bit more space. Power reserve, sorry, is the water resistance, a little bit more space. But otherwise, it's really the diameter of the movement that sets the diameter of the watch. For example, in the Streamliner, 40 was the smallest we could go. Couldn't go smaller. With the chrono, same thing. 42.3 was the minimum we could go with the size of that huge movement.
Well, and I think a lot of times, I'm guilty of this too. I think we tend to get caught up in sizes a lot as the watch community, even just 1 millimeter, as we've learned as the last week. But I think, you have to get it on the wrist. You have to get it on the wrist. You have to see, because I mean, the lugs, the case shape, everything really comes into play. And we say this a lot on our podcast when we do these reviews. We're sometimes shocked when we get a 45 millimeter watch in that really should not look good on our wrist. Yeah. We're like, it works. We like it.
But again, for us, I think the front side, which everybody sees, is very important, but the back side as well. I think the movement has to be well integrated into the back. Mm-hmm. And I always feel, I'm not attracted to watches that, when I look at the back, has one of those 25.6 millimeter 70s movements. I mean, they're great movements. I mean, brands have made millions and billions of money out of those well amortized movements. But the watch is a pure design built around, on top of it, and you could put whatever movement inside. For us, it's really, you have the movement, and then you build a case around it. And so that when you look at the back, you really, really understand the connection between the engine and the chassis, and the case, the dial and everything.
I really like that, because I think a lot of times when I've seen a lot of watches that have the open case back, it almost feels like an afterthought, where they're just like, oh, well, let's just let people peek into this movement. Yeah. Whereas your piece, and I've just been stunned by it since we've had it in. I mean, it does feel like the watch was built around that. And I guess we can kind of get into that a little bit too. I'm curious, after the first, the Streamliner came out, the chrono, was there an immediate thought to do a follow-up, or did it take time to come up with this one?
No, we usually plan 3 to 5 years ahead. I mean, some probably do more. We're not the most, since I took over 7 years ago, it takes time to establish the pipeline and know exactly what's working, what's not, what's your vision, get the inspirations. But the Streamliner was planned to become a collection and not just a one-off. I mean, I was surprised about the number of questions. Like, is it going to be like a one-off collection, one-off chrono? Well, imagine the amount of money and time we're investing into this. No, it's not going to be a one-off, because so many people say, oh, I love it, just do one. I'm like, I'm sorry. We will have to do other chronos, and we will have to expand that collection. Also because if we want people to understand why it's part of Moser, it has to have siblings. And we felt the Center Second was not the way to launch this collection, for which felt to us obvious reasons. It's a chic sport chic collection. I felt the chrono had to be the first, because that's kind of the best movement for a sport chic watch. And I'm surprised to see many sport chic watches launch based date movements or something else. No, I think if you want to establish and explain, because again, it's a story you're telling, you need the right movement. And the Agenograph, for me, is the best modern chronograph out there. I mean, maybe the El Primero is the only thing I would compare it with, but it was from a different time. So for me, that had to be the movement to be in there. I mean, I thought about developing it, and we tried and we started. And then I felt, when I discovered the Agenograph and talked to the Videresh family, those who developed that with us, I was like, guys, this is what we need. I can spend millions and years, and I don't even know what I'm going to get. And I can work with my friends and put it in there. And there's no regret. I love it. That was the perfect movement to start with. But yes, it was always planned to have something else afterwards. was a lot of questions about the colors. How does blue fit in? Do we want to put the blue since everybody is doing blue? There will be blue. We have to do blue. We love blue at Moser, but we felt we don't want to start. I mean, gray was very important for the first one because I wanted people to understand the whole of the watch. And having a too polarizing dial would have taken too much away from the rest. And we spent so much time and so much effort on developing the rest that I felt having a too strong of a dial, which is Moser is known for the dials. I was like, no, it wouldn't work. So that's why we decided to go gray, and I love it because I think people now look at it as a piece as a whole. The bracelet is important, the movement is important, the way we show the hands and everything on the dial is important, and nothing is I would say balanced. Nothing has a bigger weight than something else on this watch. So I feel it's quite well balanced. Now that you like or not the different elements is another story. But for us, it was really that we want people to look at it as a whole because also it's integrated rather than looking at elements.
Yeah. I think that's a really tough spot for not just independent brands, but brands that do make more traditional watches is kind of going into that sport watch route. And I gotta say, this watch has impressed me so much. I mean, there's this weight to the watch that, and we talked about this before too, where I like having a weight on my wrist, and you can feel the quality in just the bracelet and the case. This feels like, it feels like a sports watch. It doesn't feel like an afterthought. And I really love the direction that you guys are going with this series for sure.
We consider titanium, if you talk about weight, but I think for me too, weight is important. I used to think titanium is the future, and I went back. I know a lot of brands say now people want light watches, and I love what Bulgari is doing. Richard Mille is amazing, but I feel a watch like this one, for me, I want to feel it. I want to have it, feel its presence on the wrist, but that's very personal. But again, we're creating watches that we like, so.
Well, and again, it goes with the story. Doing something in titanium that was lightweight would not have matched up with the story and the inspiration behind the Streamliner in general. So it makes sense for it to be such a heavier watch. And I hesitate to use the word bulky because it's so integrated and it sits on the wrist so well that I wouldn't necessarily say that it's bulky. But when you look at pictures of it, or when you just look at it, you would think that it's bigger and it would not sit well. But genuinely it does. I have so much I feel like such an asshole for all the things that I said about the first one. Dang it. Oh man,
you turned around quick.
I did, man.
She just saw this piece this morning, literally 5 minutes before we started.
So which one of you said this watch was so bad? The first one, the first iteration.
The first one, that was
Calvin.
Sorry. But it's, for me, it's good. If we have those strong reactions, that means we're doing something right. It's polarizing. As I said before, when we launched the chrono, I was surprised that there were not more people reacting negatively. There were a lot, and I think fair enough. To be honest, my first reaction when I finally had my first proto on the watch, I didn't know how to react. And I remember I was with my brother and Nicholas, our head of sales, and we were looking at each other and we were like, do we like it? Is it what we had in mind when we went through this? And we had the product. We didn't look at those pictures. Taking pictures is a nightmare. That's a different story. I hate pictures. But anyway, so looking at this, and you're really questioning yourself. It depends a lot probably on characters, but I'm questioning myself on everything when it comes to products. And when we launched it, I was really, I knew we were taking risks, but again, you want to see the first reaction. There's a few people who are big fans of Moser. How will they react? Are you attracting a new crowd? It's tough, but over the years, you realize that you need to go through this negative feedback, and especially something that, we knew we were doing something that was very different, or we were hoping that it was very different. I heard there's a little bit of Ebel, there's a little bit of Porsche design. Well, there's always going to be a little bit of whatever, because we're still doing watches with hands and dials and cases, and they're pretty much round or square or rectangular, and it's difficult to really do something completely different. But yet, to putting all those elements together, are you creating a Frankenstein watch? And if so, what are the inspirations that it fit together? I mean, it's tough. And again, a lot of people will just see a flat picture from the front when you created something where the ergonomy was so important. How does it fit on the wrist? You putting this, there's no, if you look at our watches, this Streamliner collection, it doesn't have a bezel. So people are used to bezels, and here there's no bezel. So when you look at it from the front, you feel like the dial doesn't have the right proportions. But when you have it on the wrist, it's completely different. And that's what makes it difficult, because you have a lot of people react just on the picture, and I understand. I mean, that's all they have. What I usually say is, first have a constructive judgment and then wait until you have it in your hands. But again, I think it's important to be able to absorb those criticism, and we always have a second chance. Obviously, now that you see the real watch, even with the green dial.
Yeah. Even with green.
Who likes the green? I don't know.
Well, I'm the green fan. Yeah.
Everything we reviewed lately has been green, and I feel like I'm converting to. Yeah. Man.
I was not into greens, but I love the matrix green. I mean, matrix green.
Yeah,
because so much time.
It's a great shade of green. I feel like it's very specific.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, that's the thing. It was so polarizing. I think you get so used to brands, and not that Mosur was in any sort of like comfort zone or anything like that, because you were always pushing boundaries a little bit. But this was so different that I think that's what kind of that's what took me off guard. We got an email. I forget who it was from in the U.S. who's a Mosur representative.
Maybe
right
Mike,
after. Right after
he's very protective of the brand. Yeah. Yes. You're probably listening to us. Hi, Mike.
Oh man! Right after that episode, and I felt even more like an asshole.
But he was not mean. I'm sure he was not mean. I mean, he's also.
No, he wasn't. He was so sweet, and he's like, look, that's what we're looking for. We have no problem with it. We still stand behind it, and
it's probably why we're discussing today. For us, if people really don't understand, then it's good to have a discussion. And I think. Mm-hmm. I met so many people through a negative first comment, because that's the people you want the most to engage. You feel like it's your responsibility to prove them wrong, or in a way, or at least understand why and maybe learn from it. I mean, the entire team is quite active on social media, and I get all the info at Moser emails, and I answer, and frankly, the most interesting discussions usually start with somebody who hated the Swiss Alp watch, or hates something about the brand, or complains about the after-sales service or something like this, because then somebody who just loves everything you do, it's fun. I mean, but you can do whatever you want. They're going to say, oh, beautiful. And then you never challenge yourself, right? Yeah. So it's interesting to have people who say, no, this doesn't work for me. And then you try to understand why. And either, I don't believe that we need to adapt to people. On the contrary, we need to surprise people. Mm-hmm. I consider ourselves a little bit like in the haute couture, we're not prêt-à-porter. We're trying to be ahead of trends or create things that are very unexpected, rather than doing focus groups and consumer research. I think big brands are doing that to create the perfect watch that people are expecting, and what's going to be the color this year. No, we don't do that. We try to do the opposite, on the contrary. And it's maybe why everybody's doing fumé dials now.
It's true. That is very true. Do you still get nervous before, I know this released, a week ago, but do you still get butterflies in your stomach right before the release?
Yeah, I don't sleep. I mean, and I think many of my team is like passing an exam. It's getting better. I think this one, we've seen the response of the chronograph. So I knew this was, I knew we're a little bit better. I mean, the team loved the watch. We've been wearing it for a few months now, so you get used to it. I'm talking about the center second, and I felt it's probably gonna. People will like it. I think. I didn't know how much, but I had the feeling we're not gonna be killed on this one, and so I slept better than other times. I think when we launched the chronograph was more difficult emotionally. Yeah. I usually, when we do a big launch, I turn off my phone and try to sleep, but it's difficult. It's like passing an exam. You go to school and you practice, and sometimes for years, and then suddenly you have a few people that come, take the watch in their hands, and somebody might say, shit. It's not very constructive for 7 years work, and also for my team, watchmakers and stuff like that. They take it now I'm used to it, but sometimes I feel bad and to having to explain to all the people who worked on it that it's we have to respect the opinion of each other and of every individual. But I think slowly people understand what Moser is. We also understand. A lot of people tell me it's not Moser, and I ask them what is Moser, because we are still figuring out, and Moser is evolving. It's changing all the time. Moser will be different in a few years, so it's always funny to hear it's not Moser, feeling that people kind of appropriate themselves the brand, and that's fun. That means there's an emotional bond between us.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we had some listener questions that were sent in as well that I want to cover, just a couple too. All right, from Zach.Fine. How does the secondary market prices for Mosur impact the MSRP, and thoughts on the market?
Secondary market is a very important market. I think a lot of people are trying to close their eyes and forget and believe it doesn't exist. For us, it's something we monitor constantly. I mean, I know that today we had 440 watches on Chrono 24. 23 of them were antique watches. That's something we monitor daily, pretty much. We monitor pricing, especially on products that were released since 2013, because it's our responsibility to protect it. I think in a way, if we produce too many products of the same model or in general, then the prices will go down. And we have the philosophy, we call it the N-1 rule, meaning that if within 12 months we can sell N watches, then we need to produce N-1. Because if we produce less, then we're building the brand equity. And for me, the most important element in everything we do is to build brand equity. That's what will make sure that the next generation, maybe my kids or my brother's kids, will work with this brand, and we need to protect it. Every time we do N+1, we're destroying a little bit the brand. We're impacting negatively. So it's very, very important. And for the past years, before my time, a lot of watches were sold much cheaper with bad quality. So we have some watches that are significantly below retail, sometimes -40. But not many from the new ones. Actually, the new collections, they hold very well priced, and we actually even saw already the first Streamliner being sold over retail on I think it was Watchbox, and that's a good sign. That means that there's demand, and it's important that we grow slowly, not exceeding the demand. On the contrary, we don't want people to be upset because they cannot get their watch. I know, for example, now with the current capacity, with the center second that we launch, the people ordering now will get it in July or August next year, which I think is, for a brand like ours, is probably too long. I mean, big brands can be very, they can afford to make people wait 7 years on the wait list for a crazy watch. I think we need to try to find ways to do a little bit more, but not too many. Yeah. You need to find the right balance. Not easy. I mean, you don't want everything to be available right away, but at the same time, you don't want people to wait a year for a Moser. I think it's something that you want people to be proud and excited about, and you lose that excitement very, very quickly. But that's why now we stopped doing, for example, the Streamliner Center Second is not a limited edition, because I hope we can have those kind of products that live for a few years, and one day we'll tell people this is gone. Maybe we add 1 millimeter to it. No, joke aside,
the whole world freak out.
No, we'll do something else. We have tons of ideas, and I think it's great to be able. Probably 5 years ago we would have launched a Streamliner with 3 or 4 dials to be able to have a certain quantity and be able to price it the right price, and then after a year you kill one of the dials, you bring another one, and to be able now to launch a collection like this one with one color and say this is it. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people, I told a few people, if you don't like green, well, sorry, you have to wait. Maybe one day there's going to be another color. It sounds a bit pretentious, but in a way, it simplifies the life of my team as well. Otherwise, we're constantly doing something new. We need to launch products all the time, and it dilutes the message. If every month you launch a new Moser, which we've been doing for some time, it's not easy. It's a lot of work, and you need, as you said, it's a story every time. It's the logistics, it's the referencing, it's small batches, so the pricing goes up. It's not easy. But again, if you control production, if you have products that tell a story, and of course enough people to buy it. The price is protected. And that's something we're really looking at, and I hope really in the future that we'll see even less Moser watches on the secondary market. We also offer our CPO platform, so some people can purchase certain things that are not available anymore, that some people wanted to sell back or buy something else. So we have a few things that we sell on our platform with on our e-commerce with 2 years guarantee. Wow. So that's the way I think to kind of monitor it and offer something. You have to be very careful with the secondary market. There's a lot of stolen watches or very bad quality, and people tell me, "Oh, I just bought it and it doesn't work." And I'm saying there's no guarantee, so you have to pay for the service and the repair. And on a perpetual calendar, it can be quite expensive because it's a few. It could be 20, 30 hours work, and not everybody understands. So I'm telling people to be careful.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, I like that. I like that, you're really taking caution with how much you're putting out there, and that each watch tells a story, because, I mean, a lot of times we see so many variations of the watch come out at one time, and for me, it's hard to find a connection there, even though, okay, well, you might make a lot of more people happy that way because there's many color variations. I like that this tells a story because people are going to buy it, maybe because they love green, or maybe because they love the story of the watch, and they may not even be a fan of green. So I like that a lot.
Well, that's funny. A lot of people have started trying to find a name for. I mean, it's a little bit. You have the Batman, you have the Hulk, and they called it the Green Dragon or something. So I hope it stays. I mean,
I was told to ask you specifically by a friend of ours who's in a lot of these Facebook groups, and he was asking what your thoughts were on it being called the Green Dragon.
I mean, it's not for me to choose. But to be honest, I'm super excited. I mean, we had a lot of discussion internally about what would be the name of the dial, because we love to name the dials to find something cool. Like we had the funky blue, the Swiss Mad Red, the cosmic green. And this one was a long discussion, and but I mean, it's the first time that somebody came up with a name for our watch, and I'm super proud of it. I'm super excited about it. Yeah. I hope it stays. I hope like people go in a store and say, "Hey, I'm looking for the Green Dragon." That would be so cool.
We'll mention it on the podcast. That's how we'll review the watch.
Yeah, we'll refer to it as. I like it. I think it's very fitting, especially for. Kind of with the bracelet and the dial color together. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a, I mean, not that I'm meeting dragons on a regular basis, but a little bit of a dragon skin on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very organic in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so this question from our friend at Wiz_shots. Do you have any more collaborations in mind? Because the MB&F was absolutely amazing. And then out of curiosity, how did that collaboration come about?
Okay. Well, maybe there's the first question. We have long discussion. We're working on others. We have tons of ideas in and outside the watch industry, but nothing concrete very soon, because one, we didn't expect this craziness around this collaboration with Max, and yeah, it was insane. And second, it was so good, and I think it raised the bar so high that we cannot do less in the future. Expectations are too high, so now we need to think of something that we cannot just do something similar with another brand. It has to be different or better. And we have tons of ideas. Trying to think really out of the box. If you have any idea, please feel free to share. But yeah, we will do eventually something. And already with Max, we were like, oh my God, this was so good. Should we do it again? And we agreed that maybe for the 20 years anniversaries of our brands, of Moser 2.0 and MB&F, we'll do something. That meaning these were the 15 years, so maybe in 5 years, but not before that. Wow. And for the second question is, Max is known for collaborations. I mean, it's MB&F, Max Busser and friends, and he's been doing collaborations for many years with Kari Voutilainen, with Alain Zilberstein. He was already doing something similar when he was at Harry Winston. He came to me back in 2017, I think in Dubai. There was the Dubai Watch Week, and said, hey, Ed, do you mind? Well, would you be interested if we were to use your beautiful dies on one of our watch collections for as a collaboration for the 15th anniversary? And I said, well, yeah, that's cool, but in a way, we're not an artisan or an artist or something. We're a brand. So, and I always believe there's a lot of synergies between brands. So I said, well, why don't we do something that goes both ways? So I give you some elements and you give me some elements, and then we create two watches that could be both brands. So he told me, let me think about it and talk to my team. And I think 2 days later, we agreed that was a good idea. And then the complex part was the creation. The idea was really to try to use elements from the brands that already existed and mix them so that both watches could be both brands. And I think we succeeded there, where you look at the LM101 from Max and you say, wow, that's very Moser, but it's also very Max. And you look at the Endeavour cylindrical tourbillon and you think, wow, that's very Max, but it's also very Moser. The hairspring was the core of this collaboration because that's how we started working together. As I was saying in the beginning, we were supplying hairsprings, but it never used our patented double hairspring system that we use pretty much exclusively in the Moser watches on our modular escapement. And I told him, I said, but it would be nice. I mean, the LM101, the center part is the escapement, and that's our specialty. So I would love, for me, it's so difficult at the back of the watch to explain the double hairspring. Why don't we put it there on top floating? And he loved the idea. And I think that's also a big part of that success for that particular model. And for us, we had developed the cylindrical tourbillon for his 3-axis tourbillon that he launched earlier this year, the Thunderdome. And but we never managed to use it in our movements because we didn't have the space because of the dials. So using the flying T element from him gave us space to put our cylindrical tourbillon. So in the end, it worked out very well. We could use really elements that already existed. We didn't invent anything. It was just using elements already existing. And I think that's the beauty of it. Not having to redevelop a new movement for that collaboration, but using the existing element, but creating things that are completely different.
That's perfect.
Well, so wrapping things up, we've talked about storytelling a lot. You've only been at Mosur for a few years, but what's the story you want people to say about Mosur when you're gone from Mosur? Not like when you're gone from the earth, because that's kind of morbid, but
a few years from now, please. I don't know.
What do you want the story to be?
Frankly, I don't care. I just hope we're not seen as opportunistic, like people that are just there to pick on the cake and take a slice, but contribute. Again, there's tons of other things we could have done and to try to make money. We're trying maybe too much sometimes to create things, as you said, to tell stories, to bring emotions, and not to just, at the end of the day, we need to make money to be able to continue to develop, innovate, etc. But for us, really, we're driven by the passion. And I hope that all those things we're doing contribute to make people think and maybe other brands to get inspired. I think things like this collaboration we just talked about, I hope we see tons of collaborations in the future, because I think there's nothing better than that. Having different artists working together or in the fashion industry, we see that a lot. Why not in the watch industry? It feels like everybody's fighting each other in this industry, whereas we should be collaborating as a category. Because if we don't, we are under threat by much larger categories like connected watches and things like this. But the same thing when we talked about the Swiss made and through the Swiss mad watch, a lot of people laughed about the cheese watch, and still today I meet people saying, "Oh, Moser, that's the cheese watch." I like to say, it's a little bit more than just a cheese watch, but that's the risk when you launch a product like this one, that people just look at the picture. But at the same time, so many people discovered the reality of what Swiss made is, and I think it contributed also to the discussion about how can we be better in the Swiss watch industry and how can we better and be more transparent towards our customers, rather than it was a little bit of an omerta. You would try to keep the customers into the shadow, in the dark, not understanding what Swiss made means. A lot of my collectors were telling me, "Oh, I thought it means 100% made in Switzerland," which is far from that, right?
Yeah.
So we. I think it's if people remember as Moser contributing to make this industry evolve, then I'd be very happy. At the same time, the most important thing today is if we bring emotion, people are excited, love our products, are happy with what they wear on their wrist, and proud to show the product and tell the story. Because again, I hope wearing a Moser gives you the possibility to tell a story. And if that works, then I'm happy as well.
I love that.
Well, I think that's going to wrap everything up for us today. We want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for giving us some hands-on experience with the new Streamline as well. We'll have a podcast review of it coming up this next Friday.
You mean the Green Dragon?
The Green Dragon. Yes. Oh my gosh. I already forgot. I'll have to write this down really big in all my notes. We're reviewing the Green Dragon. We'll be the first people to really push it mainstream.
Yeah.
In the media world. So. But thank you so much for your time with us.
And thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, most definitely. We'll have links to a lot of the things that we talked about in our show notes, www.10and2.com. And I think that's going to wrap us up.
All right. Thank you again, Ed, for being on the show today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right.
Really had a good time.
Right.
I hope we meet in person one day.
Absolutely.
Yes, most definitely.
To Tennessee,
maybe
right?
we'll...
Tennessee, yes. Come to Nashville.
Yeah.
We can go hockey-talkie. This is like our plan is just to get everybody here in Nashville.
I've never been. Looking forward. So I'm invited.
Yes,
absolutely.
Of course. Most
Like,
definitely.
and come to Schaffhausen and visit us.
As soon as we have the chance.
I feel like
I know.
that's the trip that we would really prefer, but there's this whole like America's the coronavirus center of the world right now, so nobody wants us.
Yeah, let's hope we get out of it quickly.
Most definitely.
Definitely.
All right, well, thanks, and we'll talk later.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.